Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. The IMF chided to do more to help poor countries fight the impact food shortages are having on inflation for poor countries. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Thursday, 10th November 2022. Details when we return.
The hurricane season is now upon us, so we as Caribbean people need to remember to think safety and be prepared. Avoid venturing outside during a storm or hurricane, especially if there are strong winds. Rooftops and other debris are often blown about and can cause great damage.
Welcome back. The IMF and other multilateral groups should do more to address the impact global inflation is having on food supply shortages for poor countries. Andre Huey of SKN Newsline has more.
That's the cry of ONE, O-N-E, a civil society group fighting for more money to be released to fix the global food and economic crises for especially poor countries. ONE launched Free the Funds, a campaign to get wealthy countries to unlock the funds to help the world's poorest countries weather the economic storm. Representatives of ONE protested in front of the IMF headquarters and World Bank in Washington, D.C. during the recent IMF World Bank annual meetings. SK Newsline was in Washington, D.C. to cover the meetings and spoke to Sarah Harcourt, Policy Director, Development Finance at ONE.
We feel that the world is burning and the money and resources to fight the global food and economic crises are there, but global leaders are keeping them locked away. So we need to free the funds to fight the global crises and ensure that we have enough money to go around for everyone, because the consequences of inaction are real. If we don't see countries helping, then there are 22 African countries that are on the verge of a global debt crisis at the moment. And we know that if the 16 countries most at risk of debt distress go in, then we could see 20 million more people fall into poverty.
While the IMF announced its approval of a temporary food shock window under its emergency financing instruments. According to the IMF on its website, the food shock window will provide for a period of a year, a new channel for emergency fund financing to member countries that have urgent balance of payment needs due to acute food insecurity, a sharp increase in their food import bill, or a shock in their cereal exports. Managing Director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, spoke about the IMF's food shock window at a recent press conference during the annual meetings.
There were a number of people referring to the high fertilizer prices as potentially a risk for next year, not only the risk that we face today, but the risk that may be amplified next year. For the ability for us to expand our liquidity provision capacity and reserve provision capacity through the on-lending of SDRs, there was a much stronger sense in the room that this is a line of defense that we can make available to our members, and it is also a line of offense when it comes down to addressing climate and addressing risks of future pandemics. The countries that were the first to provide support, Australia, Canada, China, Germany, Japan, and Spain. Spain actually should come first because they were the first to provide financing. And a number of those who were in the room that have not yet pledged, indicating intention to pledge. Of course, this would give us more lending capacity, and lending capacity on terms that are very attractive for our members.
But Ms. Harcourt said this is not enough.
No, it's absolutely not enough. There's so much more that leaders could be doing. The food shock window is just a drop in the bucket compared to the need. There are 100 billion in SDRs, special drawing rights, that countries could access, and G20 leaders have promised to rechannel these to the poorest countries, but so far they're lacking 40 billion in their commitment. We've also seen commitments from the G20 to help countries restructure their debt, but so far not a single country has seen debt relief from that over a year and a half later. And we also need real commitments from the World Bank and the institutions to reform their lending frameworks so that instead of lending tens of billions now, they could lend hundreds of billions up to $1 trillion if they better leverage their resources.
Food prices and shortages persist for much of 2022 due to a combination of economic and geopolitical events, most notably the Russia-Ukraine war. This follows the food security and economic crises triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm Andre Huey for SKN Newsline.
Policymakers are considering a possible amendment to the law to make errant police officers partly liable in malicious prosecution cases in Trinidad and Tobago. TTT brings us more.
Responding to a question in the Senate, Attorney General Reginald Armour noted that his office has been in continuous consultations with the Police Service, Police Complaints Authority, and Ministry of National Security on the issue. During a recent meeting with the PCA, he said the possibility of police officers contributing to payments for award of damages was discussed. Still at the policy developmental stage, AG Armour said full research is being conducted to see what can be implemented in this country.
The Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs is considering a proposal which seeks to create a police tort, T-O-R-T, similar to what is provided for in the state of Victoria, or alternatively, to widen the scope of the State Liability and Proceedings Act, Chapter 8, Number 2, which is currently limited to negligence claims, to encompass all actions brought in tort against the state. In this regard, the government is yet to have a finalized decision on this matter.
AG Armour gave the assurance that the issue is being worked on, but said he could not provide a timeline for bringing a bill on the issue to the Parliament.
Policy development is a careful, thought-through process. There are precedents which have to be looked at and examined in the national context, and it would be, again, premature for me to prescribe a time.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick.
The opposition says it will not be participating in a special select committee appointed by government to develop a code of ethical conduct for senators. In the Senate on Tuesday in Trinidad and Tobago, the leader of government business, Dr. Amory Brown, announced the move to appoint a 6-member committee, which would consider a code for senators. Details in this TTT News report.
He said the committee would have a Senate President, Christine Kangaloo, as chairman, government senators Paula Gopi-Skoon and Dr. Mohammed Ibrahim, along with an independent senator, Anthony Vieira, and an opposition senator.
Pursuant to the motion approved in the Senate on July 6, 2022, I beg to move that a special select committee be established to consider and report on a code of ethical conduct and behavior for senators by March 31st, 2023.
Opposition Senator Wade Mark was quick to point out that they would not be participating in the special select committee, but failed to give an explanation.
Still on Trinidad, the government there is forecasting just under $700 million to be collected from the latest tax amnesty, which begins November 14th. Again, TTT News shares more.
Finance Minister Com Imbit believes the amount collected could be double the projected figure. He pointed out that in the last tax amnesty in 2021, government projected collections of $1 billion, but ended up collecting $2.5 billion. Minister Imbert added that for the last amnesty in 2021, there were calls from the business community to provide an extension, but a significant one could not be granted. This is why he said collections could easily surpass the projected value for 2022.
In this amnesty, as I just indicated, we are forecasting about $680 million. But if what happened in 2019 occurs in 2022-23, the actual collection could be double that figure. We expect about 30,000 taxpayers to benefit from this amnesty.
Minister Imbert noted that during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, many businesses had to choose between meeting salaries and rent rather than paying taxes. Now that the economy has fully reopened, he said many have communicated their intention to meet their obligations.
One of the communications we got at the Ministry of Finance towards the end of 2021 was that businesses wanted more time to settle their financial accounts, their financial statements for the years 2020 and 2021 in order to properly pay their taxes in 2021, and they asked again for an extension for those reasons. We at the time were not able to give them the extension that they wanted.
In other news, the Bahamas Commissioner of Police speaks emphatically on crime.
While the solvency rate for homicide said to be just over 60%, and while that's beyond the midway mark, Police Commissioner Clayton Fernando insists they're much more focused on prevention.
And you would see a taste of it over the weekend. Officers were up and about in every crease and corner of this Bahama land. We were up and about. We want to be consistent in doing this to ensure that the Bahamian people are safe. A lot of aggressive stop and search. Officers are arresting individuals with possession of handguns. You see what was on social media just yesterday evening, where an individual was moving around and he recorded himself with a gun resting on his lap, and it was an officer was doing point duty and he was highlighting it. And those of you who have seen that video, I'm pleased to say as well that we have that individual in custody.
Comforting words in the face of a country wrestling a triple-digit homicide rate, 6 of them just recently. Still, despite the fear index rising, the commissioner holds firm that the Bahamas is safe.
These individuals are targeting each other. We are seeing the gang retaliation, and that's what our focus is, to disrupt what is going on within those gang retaliations.
The main opposition party in Guyana walked out of the parliament on Monday after House Speaker Mansour Nadir shut down the motion by opposition leader Aubrey Norton seeking constitutional and legal amendments to allow for a clean voters list. Shamar Allen of HGP Nightly News reports.
Mr. Speaker, you are aware that every observer that observed the 2022 elections suggested the need for a clean voters list. In fact, CARICOM did say at the earliest opportunity it should be dealt with.
Moreover, the opposition leader contended that the motion recognizes the Chief Justice's ruling regarding the removal of persons from the list.
Mr. Speaker, if one look at the emerging voters list, you will see out of a population of 750,000 people, 682,000.
In response, the Speaker claimed that the matter does not qualify as one of urgent importance and refused to entertain the request for the motion. The APNU-AFC has been calling for a clean voters list in light of the March 2, 2020 election, which was marred with controversy. But despite this call from the opposition and some section of the public, the ruling People's Progressive Party CIFIC has remained immovable. In fact, only last week, Kadaki Amsterdam, a member of the Working People's Alliance, WPA, was arrested and charged by the police for using a bullhorn during a protest in front of the Guyana Elections Commission, calling for a clean voters list. Reporting for AGP Nightly News, I am Shamar Allen.
Hubbard's is once again innovating the way you shop with its new online store, providing 24-hour shopping convenience. You can shop now for appliances, hardware, houseware, building material, and more. Free delivery island-wide. Start shopping now at hubbardshardware.gd. Safe, convenient, reliable.
I am Eddie Frederick, wishing you a restful weekend. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.